Sophia stopped halfway through her oath and asked two deputies to remove me from the courtroom. Her right hand was still raised. Her left rested on a Bible held by the district attorney. Reporters lined one wall, and nearly every seat was filled with prosecutors, judges, law school friends, and campaign donors. Her mother, Maribel, stood near the front in a cream-colored dress. I was in the second row, wearing the blue jacket Sophia had helped me choose 6 months earlier. "Before I begin my career protecting families," she said, looking directly at me, "I need security to remove the woman who destroyed mine." Nobody moved at first. The man holding the Bible lowered it slightly. Then Sophia nodded toward the deputies. "She knows there's a boundary," she added. "I don't want a scene." That was how she said it. Not that I had threatened her. Not that I had caused trouble. She used the kind of language people rarely challenge, because it sounds calm and responsible. One deputy started down the aisle. He looked young enough to be embarrassed by the assignment. I stood before he reached me. Sophia watched while I collected my purse. Maribel stared at the printed program in her hands. Several reporters turned their cameras away from the oath ceremony and toward me. For years, I had pictured that morning differently. I thought I would watch Sophia take the oath, wait through the photographs, and buy her lunch at the small Mexican restaurant near the courthouse. We used to share enchiladas there when she was in law school, because one plate cost less than two. Instead, I walked toward a side door while strangers leaned toward one another and whispered. In the hallway, a woman came around the corner, carrying a red file jacket against her chest. I recognized Nina Patel, one of the senior criminal clerks. I had met her twice at office events before Sophia stopped inviting me. Nina saw me and slowed down. "Ms. Alvarez?" Applause came through the courtroom door behind us. Sophia had completed the oath without me. Nina glanced at the red jacket. "I need to speak with the district attorney." Her voice was not panicked. It was careful. A few minutes later, people began moving into the courthouse rotunda for the reception. I stayed near the elevators because the deputy had asked me to leave the ceremony, not the building. Some part of me still expected Sophia to come looking for me. She did not. Nina crossed the rotunda and leaned toward the man who had held the Bible. His name was Charles Weller. He had hired Sophia, mentored her, and spent months introducing her at public events, as proof that a difficult childhood did not determine a person's future. Whatever Nina told him changed his face. He guided her toward a side table. Sophia followed them. "What is it?" she asked. Nina kept one hand on the file. "A conflict alert appeared when your employee identification was added to the Delaney fraud matter. I'm assigned to that case. I know." Weller reached for the jacket. Nina did not release it. "The Delaney matter connects to an older investigation," she said. "Part of that record is sealed." Sophia folded her arms. "What does an old sealed record have to do with me?" Nina looked across the rotunda. Her eyes found me near the elevators. "The protected juvenile listed in that investigation," she said, "was you." Sophia did not turn toward me immediately. Weller did. His expression lasted barely a second, but I saw enough. He had not just learned that Sophia's name was inside the file. He was worried that Nina had found it. 15 years earlier, I had accepted a criminal conviction after being told it was the only reliable way to keep Sophia out of a juvenile proceeding. I had never told her why. Now the prosecutor involved in that decision had become her mentor, and Sophia believed I was the person she needed to escape. She came to live with me when she was 14. A detective picked her up from school after Maribel was arrested in an identity theft investigation involving counterfeit checks, stolen social security numbers, and several post office boxes around Phoenix. By the time I reached the family services office, Sophia had been sitting beneath fluorescent lights for almost 4 hours. She had a green backpack, 2 pairs of jeans in a grocery bag, and a stack of school papers she refused to set down. She did not ask what would happen to her. She asked whether her mother had remembered to feed a neighbor's cat. There was no cat at Maribel's apartment. She had been watching one for somebody else. Sophia spent the afternoon worrying about that animal because it gave her something small and manageable to think about. I was 32 and had just completed nursing school. I worked at a long-term care facility under a provisional permit while my full licensing application was reviewed. My apartment had 1 bedroom and a kitchen table that leaned, unless I wedged a folded receipt under one leg. I gave Sophia the bedroom. For the first few weeks, she slept on top of the blankets in her clothes. She kept her backpack beside her head and woke whenever I opened a cabinet after midnight. I understood frightened patients better than frightened teenagers. Once, She stood in my kitchen at 2 in the morning and asked whether someone could love you and still ruin your life. Yes, I told her. She nodded and went back to bed. After that, we created a routine. I left breakfast in the refrigerator before early shifts. She wrote grocery items on pharmacy receipts. We argued about homework, laundry, and whether instant noodles counted as dinner. During her sophomore year, she decided she wanted to become a lawyer. I want to be the person who decides what charges make sense, she told me. That is not exactly one person's decision. You know what I mean. I did. She wanted to understand the rooms where decisions were made about people like her. There were good years too. When Arizona State accepted her, she ran through my front door and hit the wall with her shoulder. Years later, I ironed her law school gown on the same crooked kitchen table. Most days she called me Teresa. When she was frightened or exhausted, it was still Tia. Maribel moved in and out of our lives. She served time, entered a re-entry program, disappeared, returned briefly, and disappeared again. Her letters arrived in uneven bursts. Some contained apologies, others blamed investigators, former friends, bad luck, and eventually me. I did not give Sophia every letter. Some asked for money. Others told her that a good daughter would demand contact immediately. I kept those aside. At first, I thought I was making sensible decisions for a child. As Sophia grew older, I kept doing it because I did not know how to explain where my judgment ended and my fear began. She knew I had been charged in connection with Maribel's case. She knew I accepted a plea, received probation, and lost my chance to become a nurse. She did not know what I had admitted to doing. When she asked, I said the case involved information that was not mine to disclose. She assumed the sealed portion concerned another child harmed by Maribel's group. I did not correct her. By the time Sophia joined the county prosecutor's office, the subject had become something we both knew how to avoid. Then Weller began taking an unusual interest in her career. At first, I was grateful. He remembered receptionist names, wrote handwritten notes after difficult cases, and spoke to young prosecutors as though their opinions mattered. When Sophia was hired, he sent me a card saying her discipline reflected the home in which she had been raised. I kept it on my refrigerator for 2 years. 7 months before the swearing-in, Sophia showed me a message from Maribel. We were sitting in my kitchen. I had made eggs Sophia was not eating. She placed her phone next to my coffee cup, as though she expected me to identify something in it. The account used Maribel's full name and a photograph taken outside a women's recovery center. The message said, I stayed away because Teresa made it clear she would use your childhood against me if I contacted you. You are old enough now to hear what really happened. I read it twice. The wording did not sound like Maribel. My sister could be angry, persuasive, even cruel, but she would never have written, use your childhood against me. She would have said I was holding the past over her head. Have you answered? I asked. Sophia watched my face. Why? I'm asking. You always ask questions instead of answering them. I slid the phone back. What does she say happened? That you volunteered information against her. That you used the case to take custody of me. That she tried to reach me for years and you blocked her. Your mother was convicted because of financial records, witnesses, and forged documents. Not because of me. That wasn't what I asked. No. She picked up her phone. Did you tell investigators that one of the payments was yours? I put down my fork. Who told you that? Mom. She should not know what was discussed in that proceeding. She was the defendant. Not in that part. Sophia noticed the distinction. What part, Teresa? A city bus stopped outside the window and pulled away again. I remember watching it because I did not want to look at her. I need you to be cautious with that account, I said. Do not send personal documents. Do not use your work email. You think she's running another scam. I think we don't know who controls the page. That sounds paranoid. It might. I should have explained the envelopes, the post office box, and the statement I made while Weller sat across from me. I did not. 3 days later, Sophia told me Weller had invited her to speak at a community justice luncheon. He says my story could help people. What story? That I came from a family affected by crime and still chose public service. Did you tell him Maribel contacted you? He already knew. I stopped drying the plate in my hands. How? She hesitated. He said someone from his campaign had been helping her with re-entry contacts. Weller's campaign had no legitimate reason to involve itself in Maribel's personal communications. Before I could say that, Sophia's phone lit up. I saw the first line. Ask her why she was so eager to confess. Sophia turned the phone face down. She left without hugging me. Weller had been a junior prosecutor, assigned to part of Maribel's case. The investigation crossed federal and local agencies, so his name appeared on several public documents. He told Sophia that his involvement had been minor. I remembered him sitting in the plea conference. I requested a private meeting at his office. His assistant placed me in a conference room with glass walls. Weller arrived without a file and greeted me as though we were old colleagues. "Teresa," he said, "I wondered when you might come in. Why is your campaign arranging contact between Maribel and Sophia? We support several reentry organizations." That does not answer my question. Maribel has completed treatment. She appears sincere about repairing the relationship. She also appears to know information from a sealed proceeding. His expression barely shifted. Sophia is an adult now. The record is still sealed. Your concern is understandable. He could make avoidance sound like patience. I asked whether Oscar Mendez, his campaign consultant, had set up Maribel's account. I wouldn't know. You knew she contacted Sophia before Sophia told you. Sophia works in my office. When something affects her well-being, I tend to hear about it. From whom? He studied me. You seem upset. My conviction was public. My failed nursing application was public. If I raised my voice, I would become the unstable aunt interfering with a young woman's reunion with her recovering mother. I placed both hands in my lap. Does Sophia know you were present when my plea was arranged? I disclosed that I had limited involvement. You were in the room. His jaw tightened. You made your own decision that day. Then he stood and straightened his jacket. The meeting was over. 2 weeks later, Maribel had dinner at Sophia's apartment. I was not invited. Sophia told me afterward, while reorganizing a stack of mail. She looks healthy, she said. She has a job. Where? At a dental office. Did you confirm it? Sophia stopped moving. Do you hear yourself? Yes. She brought photographs. She brought letters you returned. I never returned letters. She had the envelopes. Were they opened? I didn't inspect the glue, Teresa. Her sarcasm sounded rehearsed. Was Oscar there? For part of it. He introduced us. A political consultant had arranged a private reunion between a prosecutor and a former defendant whose old case intersected with the prosecutor's sealed juvenile history. You don't get to control this, Sophia said. I'm not trying to. You controlled it for 15 years. I could not deny all of that. I had decided which letters she received. I had avoided explaining the conviction. I had treated the subject as closed, long after she was old enough to ask questions. I made decisions when you were a child, I said. Some of them were wrong. That does not mean Maribel is giving you the full story. She says the same thing about you. Maribel began appearing at campaign events. First came a panel about re-entry, then a fundraiser, then a short video in which Weller discussed responsibility and second chances. Sophia appeared at the end. The comments praised her for forgiving her mother. Nobody mentioned me until someone found an old article about my conviction. After that, strangers began asking why Sophia had been raised by an aunt who was also charged in the investigation. A reporter called me at work. By then, I managed admissions at an assisted living center. I had spent years building a career that did not require the license I lost. The reporter asked whether I had pressured prosecutors to keep Maribel incarcerated. No. Did you benefit from her conviction? I raised her daughter. That isn't what I asked. The article appeared 2 days later beneath a photograph of Sophia and Maribel embracing. It did not accuse me of kidnapping anyone. It listed facts. I had a conviction. I received guardianship after Maribel's arrest. I restricted contact while Sophia was a minor. I refused to discuss sealed records. I had claimed responsibility for funds associated with the scheme. Placed together, the facts created a conclusion the article never had to state directly. I had helped convict Maribel, taken her daughter, and hidden the details. Sophia called that night. Did you talk to the reporter? She called me. You made it worse. I answered one question. You sounded defensive. She asked whether I profited from raising you. There was a pause. You always make it sound like you rescued me. I sat on the edge of my bed. I have never said that. You don't have to. That sounds like Maribel. No, it sounds like me. The following week, I received a letter from the prosecutor's office instructing me not to enter restricted employee areas or contact Sophia through official channels. It was not a restraining order. It did not say I had threatened anyone. It created a document that could later be described as a precaution. I drove to Sophia's apartment and stayed in the parking lot for 10 minutes. Her living room light was on. Someone crossed behind the blinds. I went home without knocking. The next morning, my supervisor asked me to take administrative leave. Several residents' families had complained after reading the article. "I know your work," she said while folding the same sheet of paper twice. "This is temporary." "How temporary?" "I don't know. My keycard stopped working before I reached the parking lot." That afternoon, Weller's campaign released another video. Sophia said children should not carry the shame of adults' choices. She said fear could be used to isolate families. She said reconnecting with Maribel helped her understand her own history. She never said my name. Oscar sent me the link. "It would be best for Sophia if you did not attend the swearing-in." I replied that Sophia had personally invited me months earlier and had never withdrawn the invitation. His answer arrived less than a minute later. "Then, please do not make her ask you to leave." I took screenshots. Until then, I had treated the conflict like a family argument. "I called Sophia," I explained. "I asked to meet." Oscar was creating something more permanent. Articles, messages, office warnings, campaign footage, and a record suggesting I was becoming unstable. I began writing down dates. Then came the swearing in, the deputies, and Nina's red file. By that evening, the video of my removal had spread online. The clip began with Sophia's accusation and ended before Nina entered the rotunda. To anyone watching, I looked like a disgraced relative who had intruded on a young prosecutor's achievement. My phone filled with messages. Some asked what happened. Most had already decided. I turned it off and sat at my kitchen table until daylight came through the blinds. At 7 in the morning, I removed the blue jacket and found Sophia's invitation in the pocket. She had written across the bottom, "Couldn't have done it without you." I left it on the table. For 2 days, I considered leaving Phoenix without responding to any of it. Then I received a voicemail from Grant Lee. I had not spoken to him in almost 13 years. Grant had been the postal inspector who investigated Maribel's fraud network. "Teresa, this is Grant. I saw the courthouse footage. I also received a request for information connected to an internal conflict review. Before I answer anything, I need to speak with you." I called him back. He gave me the address of a diner near his old office. "Bring every message you received from Weller's campaign. Do you believe me?" I haven't seen enough to believe anybody yet. It was not comforting, but it was fair. Grant was already sitting in a booth when I arrived. He had gained weight and lost most of his hair. Reading glasses rested low on his nose. He had arranged the sugar packets into a straight row beside his coffee. He read the screenshots without interrupting. When he reached Oscar's warning about the ceremony, he removed his glasses. "Did Sophia ever send a formal request for no contact?" "No." "Did she tell you she considered you dangerous?" "No." "Did you threaten Maribel?" "No." He nodded but did not tell me what he thought. Then, he picked up the screenshots from Maribel's account. "Do you have the original message files?" "They're on Sophia's phone. These only prove what appeared on your screen." "I understand. What does Sophia think you admitted?" "That I helped Maribel. That I took the plea because I was involved. That I used the prosecution to gain custody." "You did make a false statement." "Yes." "You understood that when you signed it." "Yes." "And you avoided telling Sophia why." "Yes." Grant pushed the screenshots aside. "Then don't claim you handled every part of this correctly. You didn't." "I know. Good. That will save time." He pointed to the documents. "Your decisions as Sophia's guardian are one issue. Weller's conduct is another. Oscar's messages are another. If you try to defend your entire life, they'll keep you busy until nobody remembers what you originally questioned." I showed him an old evidence receipt I had found in a metal box beneath my bed. One line was underlined in blue. 3 sealed envelopes recovered from juvenile courier. Grant tapped the wording. "Courier. Not suspect. Not participant. You already knew she was being used? We classified her as an unwitting minor before your plea." "Then why did Weller tell me the juvenile unit might charge her?" Grant stopped moving. "He told you that directly? He said that unless an adult accepted responsibility for directing her, prosecutors would have to determine whether she knowingly participated." Grant stared at his coffee. "He attended the task force meeting where we concluded she didn't understand what she was carrying. Why didn't you stop him?" I was not in the plea negotiations. By the time I saw the final agreement, you had signed. The waitress approached. Grant waited until she left. I can't give you sealed material, he said. I can confirm what I personally observed if investigators ask. You can obtain your plea transcript, sentencing documents, and public campaign records. What about the account? Start smaller. Find one date they cannot explain. Before leaving, he asked why I attended the ceremony after Oscar told me to stay away. Because Sophia invited me. That is the answer. Don't bury it beneath 15 years of family history. The first public record I found was an invoice. Campaign expenditures showed regular payments from Weller's re-election committee to Oscar Mendez's consulting company. Most were listed as communications or event planning. 3 entries were different: family narrative development, re-entry participant coordination, digital identity management. The payments began 4 days before the first message from Maribel's account. I sent the records to Nina. She replied from a personal email address and asked whether I had an attorney. I did not. She explained that the county opened a conflict review because Sophia had been assigned to the Delaney identity theft case. One digital account in that case was linked to a post office box used during Maribel's old fraud scheme. The connection had been missed because the juvenile appendix was sealed and the older investigation was archived under a different number. When I added Sophia as the assigned prosecutor, Nina wrote, the system matched her date of birth to the protected juvenile index. That was the alert she carried into the ceremony. I asked why Weller reacted as though he already knew. Nina did not answer by email. 2 days later, she asked to meet at a public library. She arrived without documents and chose a table where nobody sat behind us. The office preserved several messages Sophia received from Maribel's account, she said. They were attached to an internal safety memo about you. A safety memo. It said your opposition to the reunion might escalate. Did the messages contain threats from me? No. Did I contact Maribel? Not in the material I saw. What supported the warning? Oscar's summaries. Nina explained that downloaded social media messages contained technical headers. Several messages from Maribel's account had been created through a management platform licensed to Oscar's consulting company. That alone did not prove misconduct. Maribel could have authorized him to manage her page. One message, however, was sent while Maribel was attending a supervised treatment session without access to her phone. It was the same message Sophia had shown me over breakfast. Ask her why she was so eager to confess. Nina reported the discrepancy. Weller removed her from the review the following morning. What reason did he give? That I had exceeded my role. Had you? She adjusted the strap of her bag. My job is to identify records, access problems, and conflicts. I found all 3. The next piece came from my plea transcript. I remembered the room. I remembered Weller's gray suit and Grant sitting near the wall. I remembered admitting that I directed Sophia to mail envelopes containing counterfeit checks. I had forgotten Weller's exact explanation to the judge. The transcript showed him saying my plea resolved uncertainty regarding the juvenile's level of participation. Grant's team had already classified Sophia as unwitting. There was no unresolved question in the investigative record. Weller had introduced one during the negotiation. I called Grant. He agreed to submit a sworn statement confirming the task force's conclusion and the date Weller attended the briefing. The next record appeared to support Weller. A bank summary showed $8,400 deposited into my account 3 days before Maribel's arrest. It looked like payment from the scheme. For several hours, I sat on my bedroom floor trying to remember where the money came from. Then I recognized the amount. It was a tuition refund. A financial aid correction had caused my nursing school to return a cashier's check I had already submitted. I searched through 2 storage bins before finding the letter. The date matched. The bank branch matched. The old case summary listed the deposit, but did not attach the refund notice. That omission allowed Maribel to say I received stolen money. It also made my confession easier for other people to believe. Then Nina called me. She took longer to answer than she had during any of our previous calls. I could hear pages turning, followed by the click of a door closing on her end. The reviewers recovered emails from Weller's archive. What kind of emails? One was sent to Oscar before Sophia was hired. What did it say? I can't send it to you. It's under investigation. Nina. Another pause. Then she read the line. Her sealed family history gives us a powerful redemption narrative, but she never needs to see the appendix. The email was dated 11 months before Sophia received her job offer. Weller had not discovered her connection when Nina entered the reception. He had reviewed the sealed record before recruiting her. Once investigators examined the dates, the rest became easier to follow. Weller accessed the juvenile appendix while reviewing Sophia's application. He claimed he needed to evaluate a possible conflict. 3 days later, he emailed Oscar about her redemption narrative. He hired Sophia 2 months afterward. For nearly 3 years, he assigned her to cases involving identity theft victims, vulnerable families, and juvenile witnesses. Those assignments strengthened the public image he later used during his re-election campaign. Oscar found Maribel through a re-entry nonprofit. He helped her obtain temporary work, arranged transportation, and paid her a small consulting fee to appear at campaign events. Some early messages to Sophia were genuinely written by Maribel. When Sophia remained cautious, Oscar began editing them. Later, he sent some himself. He made Maribel sound more organized. He also made the accusations against me more precise. Maribel knew he had access to the account. She later claimed she did not approve every message. That was possible. She also benefited from what he was doing and did not ask many questions. The Delaney case explained why the campaign moved so quickly. Robert Delaney had been arrested for operating an identity theft scheme targeting elderly residents. One of his online accounts was connected to a post office box used in Maribel's old network. His defense attorney began asking whether witnesses, informants, or protected juveniles from the previous investigation had any connection to the current prosecution team. If Sophia remained assigned, her identity could surface through a discovery dispute. Weller would have to explain why he hired her and placed her on a related case without disclosing what he knew. Before that happened, any warning from me needed to look like family resentment. The swearing in was meant to settle the public version. Sophia, the successful prosecutor, would reject the aunt with a conviction and stand beside the rehabilitated mother she had supposedly been denied. The cameras captured that story. They did not capture Nina's file until it was too late. The county appointed outside counsel to investigate Weller's conduct. Sophia was removed from the Delaney case and placed on administrative leave. Nina returned to the conflict review. I expected Sophia to call. Instead, she released a statement saying she had no prior knowledge of the sealed appendix and was cooperating with investigators. That part was accurate. She also said the review should not be used to revive personal grievances unrelated to her professional work. The wording sounded like Weller. I sent her one message. I have documents you should see. I will not release them publicly before the review. You can contact Grant directly. She read it. She did not respond. 2 days later, Maribel came to my apartment. She stood far enough from the door that the camera captured her entire body. I need to talk. I opened the door, but left the chain attached. Did you know Oscar was sending messages through your account? Some. Did you know Weller had accessed Sophia's sealed record? No. Did Sophia carry the envelopes for you? Maribel glanced down the hallway. She was a kid. That is not an answer. I told her to drop things at the post office. I didn't tell her what was inside. And after I took the plea, you made your decision. You let her believe I confessed because I participated in the fraud. You kept her. I raised her. You got to be the responsible one. Her arms were crossed so tightly that her fingers pressed into her sleeves. I was not responsible all the time, I said. I was there. Maribel looked toward the elevator. Then she told me why she had come. Oscar wanted her to sign a declaration stating that I threatened her after prison and prevented her from contacting Sophia. In exchange, he offered to arrange legal assistance if investigators questioned her role in the false messages. Are you signing it? I don't know. Yes, you do. She left without answering. An hour later, she sent me a photograph of the unsigned declaration. Oscar's company email appeared at the bottom. The document became evidence that he was trying to influence her account after the investigation had begun. 6 weeks after the swearing-in, we returned to court. The hearing was not a criminal trial. The judge had been asked to decide whether limited portions of the sealed juvenile record could be disclosed to investigators, and whether Sophia's assignment had compromised the Delaney prosecution. Because of Weller's access history, the judge also allowed testimony about how the information had been used. The same reporters returned. This time, I entered through the front doors. Weller sat with private counsel. Oscar sat behind him, tapping one foot against the floor. Sophia sat at a separate table with an attorney from her professional association. Maribel was alone in the second row. I chose a seat near the aisle. Sophia glanced at me once and opened a yellow legal pad. Weller's attorney began by describing me as a family member with a long-standing grievance. He said I attended the ceremony, despite knowing Sophia did not want contact. He said my complaints turned an administrative oversight into a public controversy. When I was called, he asked why I ignored Oscar's message. Because Oscar was not Sophia. Did you understand that your presence might upset her? Yes. And you went anyway. She invited me. She never withdrew the invitation herself. He displayed the screenshot. You were told not to attend. I was told by a campaign consultant that it would be better for the event if I stayed away. Did you consider that distinction important? Yes. A chair creaked somewhere in the gallery. Weller's attorney waited, perhaps expecting me to explain further. I did not. He moved to the old case. You pleaded guilty in the original fraud matter. Yes. You admitted directing Sophia to mail envelopes. Yes. You lied to investigators. Yes. His head lifted slightly. Why should this court consider you reliable now? Because the lie I told is already documented. The question here is whether Mr. Weller used the possibility of juvenile charges after investigators had concluded Sophia did not knowingly participate. The judge reminded me to answer only the question asked. I'm sorry. Weller's attorney returned to his table. As he passed his client, Weller leaned toward him and covered his microphone with one hand. Grant testified next. He explained the old investigation in plain language. Maribel's group used stolen personal information to create counterfeit checks and accounts. Several people mailed or collected envelopes. Sophia's age, school records, and limited actions led investigators to classify her as an unwitting courier. Was that conclusion reached before Ms. Alvarez entered her plea? Outside counsel asked. Yes. Was Mr. Weller present at the meeting? Yes. Weller's attorney stood. Could that classification have changed if new evidence appeared? Yes. Did new evidence appear? No. Grant was shown the plea transcript. He read Weller's statement that uncertainty remained regarding Sophia's participation. Was that statement consistent with the investigative record? No. A photographer shifted position near the wall. The movement drew Weller's attention. He watched the camera rather than Grant. Nina testified after lunch. She explained the conflict alert, the sealed index, and Weller's access history. She gave dates without adding adjectives. Weller opened the juvenile appendix 11 months before Sophia was hired. He opened it again, 4 days before asking Oscar to begin family narrative research. He accessed it a third time on the morning Sophia was assigned to the Delaney matter. Did he disclose the conflict? Outside counsel asked. No. What happened after you raised it? I was removed from the review. Weller's attorney approached the witness stand. You disagreed with Mr. Weller's assessment of your authority. I asked that the conflict be evaluated, and when he determined that you exceeded your role, you took offense. Nina adjusted the microphone. I did not take offense. I saved the access log. A few people in the gallery exchanged glances. Weller's attorney returned to his table without asking another question. The technical examiner explained the social media records. Several messages from Maribel's account were sent through software licensed to Oscar's company. 2 originated from the campaign office network. 1 was created while Maribel was in a supervised treatment session without device access. Oscar's attorney argued that multiple employees shared the network. The judge agreed that the records did not prove who typed every message. They did show that the campaign concealed its role in managing the account. Oscar was called next. He described his work as communication support. Did you send messages from Maribel Ruiz's account? Outside counsel asked. I may have helped with wording. Did you identify yourself to Sophia? I was communicating on Maribel's behalf. That was not the question. Oscar looked toward Weller. Not every time. Did you send the message asking Sophia to confront Teresa Alvarez about her confession? I don't recall. The examiner's report was placed in front of him. Oscar read the first page, then rubbed his thumb along its corner. I may have drafted it based on information Maribel provided. The unsigned declaration appeared next. Oscar claimed it had been prepared at Maribel's request. Maribel was called. She walked past Sophia without looking at her. One heel caught briefly in the carpet, and she had to steady herself against the rail. Outside counsel asked whether she requested the declaration. No. Did Oscar offer legal assistance if you signed it? Yes. Did Teresa Alvarez cause your incarceration? No. Did she prevent every attempt you made to contact Sophia? No. Did Sophia carry envelopes for you before your arrest? Weller's attorney objected because the question involved the sealed record. The judge allowed a limited answer. Maribel gripped the sides of the witness chair. Yes. Did Sophia know the envelopes contained counterfeit checks? No. Sophia's pen stopped moving. Did Teresa know you had used Sophia as a courier? Yes. Did Teresa tell you in advance that she planned to accept responsibility? No. I found out afterward. Did you allow Sophia to believe Teresa confessed because she participated in your scheme? Maribel looked toward her daughter. Yes. Why? She lowered her head. A few seconds passed. Because if Teresa was the reason I lost Sophia, then I didn't have to admit that I was. Nobody spoke. The court reporter shifted her hands away from the keyboard for a moment, then resumed. Sophia placed her pen on the table. A dark line of ink marked the side of her middle finger. The final exhibits were my plea transcript and Grant's task force report. The report was dated 12 days before the plea. Protected juvenile. No evidence of knowing participation. Recommend no referral for charges. Weller's signature appeared on the attendance sheet for the meeting where that conclusion was discussed. The judge looked at him. Were you aware of this recommendation when you described the juvenile's participation as unresolved? Weller leaned toward his microphone. My concern was that the investigation remained fluid. The judge waited. He adjusted his tie. I was attempting to reach a resolution that protected a child. Outside counsel displayed the archived email he sent Oscar years later. Her sealed family history gives us a powerful redemption narrative, but she never needs to see the appendix. Sophia's attorney stopped writing. A second email appeared. If Teresa resists the reconciliation rollout, her plea gives us a clean credibility problem. Weller reached for a water glass. His fingers touched the rim, but he did not lift it. The emails showed that he knew Sophia had never seen the sealed record. They also showed that he planned to use that ignorance. Outside counsel placed the campaign invoices beside the safety memo and the Delaney assignment record. Weller recruited Sophia, partly because her background benefited his political image. When the Delaney matter threatened to reveal an undisclosed conflict, Oscar helped construct a public version in which I was possessive, unreliable, and angry about Sophia's reunion with Maribel. My conviction became the reason nobody should listen when I questioned them. Weller's attorney requested a recess. The judge granted 15 minutes. The courtroom loosened all at once. Reporters moved toward the hallway. Chairs scraped. Oscar stood and spoke rapidly into his lawyer's ear. Sophia remained seated. Her attorney said something to her, but she shook her head. I went to the restroom, washed my hands, and stared at a paper towel dispenser that had been refilled crookedly. When I returned, Sophia was standing near my seat. She did not speak. Neither did I. A deputy announced that the hearing was resuming. Sophia returned to her table. Outside counsel completed the exhibits, then Sophia asked to speak privately with her attorney. When they came back, she was no longer carrying the legal pad. Her attorney informed the judge that Sophia wanted to make a limited statement. The judge reminded her she was not required to testify. I understand. Sophia took the witness chair. She said Weller described his role in Maribel's prosecution as minor. He encouraged the reunion and told her my objections were attempts to maintain control. She admitted approving the safety memo without reading the original message exports. She admitted asking deputies to remove me. Outside counsel asked whether she had seen the sealed appendix before Nina found the conflict. No. Did Teresa tell you that you carried the envelopes? No. Did she explain why she entered the plea? No. Sophia turned toward me. Why didn't you tell me? It was not part of the examination, but the judge allowed the question to remain. I answered from my seat. Every time I tried to tell you, I heard it in my head, as a speech about everything I sacrificed for you. I didn't want our relationship to become a debt. You decided that for me. Yes. You also decided which letters I could read. Yes. Her lower lip moved once before she pressed it still. I should have known. Yes. I had no answer that could make those decisions smaller than they were. The judge authorized limited disclosure of the sealed appendix to the independent investigators and Sophia's attorney. Sophia was formally removed from the Delaney case. The prosecutor's office was ordered to review matters in which Weller failed to disclose related conflicts. Weller resigned 3 days later. His statement said he was stepping aside to protect the integrity of the office. It did not mention the emails or the plea negotiation. The state bar opened an investigation. Oscar was charged months later with offenses connected to digital impersonation and attempts to influence a witness. No single document settled the matter. The account records, payments, invoices, and proposed declarations supported one another. Maribel faced new scrutiny over whether she helped conceal Oscar's activity and whether her connection to the Delaney network was more recent than she claimed. She entered another treatment program, while those questions remained unresolved. Sophia requested administrative leave. She issued a short statement, acknowledging that she allowed a family narrative to affect her judgment. She admitted condemning someone publicly, without reviewing the underlying evidence. She did not ask for sympathy. She did not mention me by name. Grant helped me petition for a review of my conviction. The record still showed that I lied to investigators. I had done that, and no order could make it disappear. The court eventually set aside the conviction after considering the pressure used during the plea process, my completion of probation, and the information Weller misrepresented. My nursing permit was not restored. Too many years had passed. I was no longer the woman who had organized her life around receiving that license. My employer offered me my admissions position back. I thanked them and declined. I sold my apartment, rented a small trailer, and moved to a town in New Mexico where the highway ran between low hills and long stretches of desert. Before leaving Phoenix, I sent Sophia a letter through her attorney. I told her I would not participate in interviews, public apologies, or a staged reunion. I asked her not to come to my home without permission. I gave her a post office box. 3 months later, Sophia drove to New Mexico. My neighbor saw a rental car parked near the house. Sophia later wrote the date at the top of the letter she left beneath my door. She did not knock. I found the envelope after sunset when I returned from a shift at a hospice supply office. A thin line of red dust had gathered along one edge. Her handwriting had not changed. I left it on the kitchen counter while I heated soup. Then I opened it. Sophia did not ask me to forgive her. She wrote that she built a career around evidence, without understanding how easily facts could be selected, separated, and arranged to create a misleading account. She wrote that Maribel harmed her. She wrote that Weller used her ambition and her history. Then she wrote, "Neither of those things excuses what I did to you." She admitted that asking deputies to remove me was not simply a boundary. She wanted the room to watch her reject me. She also wrote that I had been wrong to keep important parts of her past from her after she became an adult. She was right. I folded the letter and placed it inside the metal box that once held my plea papers. For several weeks, I did not answer. My new life was small and mostly ordinary. I bought a second-hand kitchen table that did not wobble. I learned which grocery store discounted bread on Tuesday mornings. I stopped checking the window each time an unfamiliar car slowed near the house. One Saturday, I found an old silver necklace Sophia had given me. The clasp was broken. I repaired it with a pair of small pliers and wore it to work. That evening, I wrote her 4 sentences. I received your letter. I believe you understand more than you did before. I am not ready to see you. You may write again in 6 months. I still loved her. I just was not ready to sit across from her and behave as though knowing the facts had repaired what happened in that courtroom. I knew I should have answered her questions years earlier. I also knew that when she condemned me publicly, she had not asked to see a single document. I could regret my decision without pretending hers had not happened. Was I right to keep my distance after she apologized? Or should I have opened the door when she drove to New Mexico? And which caused more damage? The secret I kept, or the judgment she made before checking the facts? Tell me what you would have done.